code becomes modular. If I'm writing a unit test, I'll make sure that I'm breaking down the code to the smallest level possible. So that way my code is more modular, and that way I can reuse that piece of code over and over again. So that's one more thing. So make sure that your code is modular. So that's one guideline. The next thing.
Welcome back to the show, and today we're looking at the fundamentals of unit testing, BDD, which is behavior-driven development, and mocking, and using TestBox and MockBox to do that. And I'm here with Uma Ghotikar, and if you don't know her, she is a ColdFusion developer, been doing it CFML and ColdFusion for 6 years now, and she is giving a talk on this topic at Into the Box. So we will cover what is unit testing and why everyone listening should be doing it, and guidelines for writing great unit tests. And then also we'll look in detail at TestBox and what it lets you do and how to structure unit tests using it. We'll look at what mocking is and how to do that using MockBox and why you want to do that. And we'll also look at behavior-driven development, or BDD, and why you should be doing that and how to do it using TestBox and MockBox together. So welcome, Uma.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So what is unit testing for those few people listening who may not know?
So unit testing is a level of software testing where, individual units or components of a software are tested. And what that means is, so unit is the smallest piece of functionality that can be tested in isolation. So having said that, they are definitely low level. They are of small scope, and in procedural language, it could be a function, it could be a method, and in object-oriented language, it could be a class or a method that belongs to a class. So basically, it's the smallest piece of functionality. That's what unit is. And the entire purpose of unit testing is to validate that each unit of software is performing as designed. So that's why we should do unit testing. That's a brief answer to.
Now, why is it better to write all these unit tests for all the functions and methods you have and so on, instead of just letting your testers go crazy and try out the app? Why is it better to do it through unit tests?
Oh, okay. So let's say if we don't have unit tests in place, and if the developers are developing a code, and first of all, we would need UI to be developed in order to test that. Let's say developers develop UI, and entire code is written, front end, back end, everything is written, and there's no unit test in place, and we haven't done any integration test, and we are just now firing a browser, and let's say we have a form. So now developer or whoever testing that code, that piece of functionality, needs to open that form and submit that form. Or first of all, they need to fill up all the fields, make sure that validation is working, and if there are any hidden fields. So it depends. Like you have to remember all the use cases. If to just focus on one entire piece of functionality is working or not. And again, let's say in future, if that code gets changed for some reason, then you have to redo this entire thing. You don't know which field has changed, and you will redo the same thing. And you have to remember, first of all the n number of use cases that were that are to be tested. But what happens with unit test is, so each unit is supposed to have a test case coverage around it. So that let's say a developer has written a test, and they have now built a code around it. So the basic idea is to write the test first, and then to write the code to make that test pass. So that's the basic idea of unit testing is. So this is basically reactive programming. So we know what always my code is going to fail. So now, knowing that, I'm going to develop my code. And let's say, so unit tests, first of all, give us instant or immediate feedback. So if I develop something and I run unit tests, boom, I know, oh, this is failing. So I can immediately fix that code. I don't have to wait for, my entire piece of functionality to be built and then running up the tests in the UI. So that's the basic idea. why to do
Okay.
it in a unit test way rather than the traditional way.
Yeah, so it ensures that you're testing all the methods and functions, all the pieces of the code and use cases. And then also, unlike having someone in QA test it, if you've written unit tests, they can be automated and repeated every
Right,
time you edit the code.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
great. So if we want to write unit tests, what kind of suggestions do you have for guidelines for writing them?
Sure. So first of all, the unit test must be fast. What that means is, they should be able to provide us the immediate feedback. And that's the key point here, because while refactoring code or while developing the code, you need immediate feedback, like in seconds or milliseconds. I'm talking in terms of unit tests right now, because if they are taking more time, then the entire process, like then the developers would uh, rarely run it, and then that basically loses the entire purpose of having unit tests. So they should be fast, and to make that fast, so what makes unit tests to run slow? So that's if you're talking out to databases, if you're talking out to file systems or APIs, so external calls like this, so you have to mock those calls and then make sure each unit is kind of isolated, so that um, your test would run fast and you're focusing on just one small piece of functionality there. So make sure your units are isolated. The second thing is, the code becomes modular. If I'm writing a unit test, I'll make sure that I'm breaking down the code to the smallest level possible. So that way my code is more modular, and that way I can reuse that piece of code over and over again. So that's one more thing. So make sure that your code is modular. So that's one guideline. The next thing is make sure that your tests are independent. What that means is, so there is no specific guarantee that if we are having multiple test cases, so there is no particular guarantee, like for which test will run first. So make sure they are independent of each other. So not one test should be dependent on runtime of any other test. So that's one thing. Then they should be robust. What that means is, no matter what environment you run the test on, or no matter what time of the day you run test on, or no matter what day you run test on, they should always produce the deterministic results, like the same results all the time. So that's robust. Make sure you are maintaining your test as you change. So if you change your code, make sure that your tests are in sync with your code, and they should be maintained as we go along. And the last thing is, they should have a clear defined purpose. So make sure that each of the unit tests is serving a clear purpose. Like, okay, I'm focusing on this piece of functionality, so I know what my preconditions are. Uh, state of the that's my state of the world before running the test. We'll come to this part when we talk about given when then, but that's possible. Basically, the given stage, you know what the preconditions are, and now you know what is your what is the action that causes that test to run. So that's basically when part, and then what is the testable outcome that you're expecting that test is giving. So that's basically the then part. So basically, that test is serving a clear defined purpose. So make sure each of the tests has clear. So let's say I run a test, so I know, like, okay, it should do this and this and this. So I know, once I run the test, I'm sure that these three things are running for sure. So that's the main thing. Your test should have a clear defined purpose. And
So,
yeah.
so if your ColdFusion app is a model
Hmm.
view controller
Hmm.
style app, which many modern apps are, you're mainly testing the model part of this, where there's actual things happening. Rather, you can't really test the view, right?
Right.
Because that's all
Right.
HTML, and you're not
Right.
really testing the controller. I imagine you're mainly
Right.
testing actions happening inside the model.
Right. I mean, most of my testing was done around the model, like the service layer components. I have done, let's say, very little bit of controller testing, but majority of it is, focusing on service layer CFCs or components. So model, yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. So, and just to be clear, you know, unit tests are only one part of testing. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you may be doing integration testing, or you might be testing the UI, or all kinds of other things. But this is just to make sure that all the functions and objects you've written are working correctly as you code or refactor.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk a bit about XUnit, because that's one of the things you can use for this, and how you'd use that if you were doing behavior-driven development.
Sure. So MXUnit was the only available framework until TestBox came into picture. So all those unit tests were written using XUnit style. And that's basically the test-driven development. So what that does is, so any developer, when a functionality is getting developed, any developer would write the test first and make sure that test is failing. And once the test fails, you just write enough code to make that test pass. So that's how you go. It's like reactive programming, as I already spoke. So that was XUnit styles of testing. I have done only a little bit of that, but I have most of the time I have used BDD style of testing. That's uh, like available from TestBox, and it is a major evolution to test-driven development, in my opinion, because it is. I mean, it still has its roots in the TDD, but it has taken TDD to a whole new level. And so, yeah, I have. I'm mostly big fan of BDD now because that produces clear and readable outputs. It creates documentation, and I know where to start, or what is to be tested and what not to test. So it becomes clear when using BDD.
Now, you mentioned test-driven development, TDD, and
Mhm.
then behavior-driven development, BDD, but what exactly, they sound the same thing. What's the difference?
Okay, sure. So TDD, as the name suggests, it's test-driven development, and what that does is it focuses on methods. First of all, they are very developer oriented. They focuses on each smallest method or functions in the component level. In ColdFusion, we call it CFC. So it focuses on CFC level. So even though if you have all of your test coverage ready for all of your functions, and if you just if you just run all the tests and you create a report out of that, you don't know if your software is um, satisfying your customer requirements. So that's one drawback of that. And uh, the main problem with that is sometimes even developers give up. I mean, it is really tedious to write those tests because they are very much focusing on just one unit, not one just smallest function, and not bothering about the entire software specifications. So and also in while doing that, you have to use mocking a lot of times because you are isolating basically the behavior, the one function at a time. So sometimes you are just testing, let's say I have a function A, and what that does is it depends on function B, and so it gives calls to function B and function C, and there is if else around that. So if I'm mocking function B and function C, so basically I'm just testing if else there. So it it is like really, oh, okay, that becomes really dumb to test that function A then. So sometimes it is um, very geeky. Let's put it that way. So yeah. So but I mean, it has its advantages, but it has its drawback.
Okay, so in test-driven development, you're writing low-level unit tests, and in behavior-driven development, you're looking at high-level use cases that the user would go through in the
Okay.
app. Is
So
that
yeah, so let's say while doing TDD, first of all, sometimes we don't know where to start because we are focusing on a inside level. So we don't know where to start, or we are not sure exactly what to test or what not to test in one of the entire in the entire suite. So, but what happens with behavior-driven development is, so we would start with the user story or acceptance criteria. So we know what our system is supposed to do. And then we would break down those user stories into smaller scenarios. So we have a clear defined scenarios. And then for each scenario, we would code those scenarios into specifications, which will give us a clear idea or head start to, okay, this is our software's acceptance criteria. Now we are breaking down to this specific scenario, and now we are supposed to code to make that scenario work. So we have a clear idea to where to test. I mean, where to start. So that's one big advantage. And
Now, you mentioned user story there.
yeah.
What's an example of a story? Because not everyone has come across use cases and stories, and they may be thinking, what on earth are we talking about here? So
Okay.
can you give a concrete example of what you mean by a story and a scenario?
Sure. So let's say mm, this is just a hypothetical one. So let's say user is supposed to share their feedback through one of the form on the website. So that's a big level story. And uh, while breaking down that into scenario, what I would do is, okay, so as an application user, uh, I want to be able to submit this form, and once I submit this form, I should be able to get a confirmation message on my screen saying that, oh, hello, your feedback was submitted successfully. So that's basically a hypothetical example of one story. And when you convert that into scenario, so there is one scenario. So, okay, I'm a user. I will fill out a form. And when I hit submit, I should see the message. So that's a broken down story scenario. So what happens at each level? And when you have these kinds of scenarios, you know what your system is supposed to do. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that
Okay.
helps explain it. So
Okay.
so
So,
what,
so basically, this is outside in. We would start at the very high level specification, and then we would just break down, and go inside.
and you do this using TestBox.
Right. So again, we are not doing end-to-end testing, because sometimes I hear that kind of confusion. Like, BDD is end-to-end. So that's right. But here, what we are trying to do is we are trying to bring in the BDD syntax into the unit testing using TestBox. So our testing is still going to be, test first and code later. So it's still going to be on the unit test level, and it's still going to be test first and code later, but we are bringing in the BDD syntax. So what TestBox does it for us is it is a framework that will do that. First of all, that supports both XUnit styles of testing and BDD styles of testing. So, and it is open source, so that's a great thing. Uh, and yeah, it is a tool that lets us do that. So it is bringing us the BDD syntax for us. It won't do BDD for us, but we have to, using that tool and framework and using their features and BDD style, that's available. We are just supposed to write either XUnit or BDD styles of testing.
Okay, so TestBox is free to use because
Right.
it's open source, and
Right.
it uses a standard syntax for this. Is that right, or is it its own custom syntax? Or
Not sure if I followed that, but there.
well, when you're writing tests in TestBox,
Uh-huh.
what language are you using?
It is CFML. So, I mean, does that
Oh,
answer?
okay. So you're writing the tests in CFML.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
I don't know. I haven't used it. And not
I mean,
everyone listening has used it. So
I mean,
that's why I'm asking.
yeah. I mean, it supports any CFML projects, not just box projects, but it supports the other standalone uh,
Okay. And so
CFML.
you write the
Yeah.
tests in ColdFusion language inside TestBox.
I'm writing tests to test my ColdFusion product.
Right, but the language you use to write the tests,
Hmm.
that's just regular ColdFusion. It's not some wacky XML language or
No, no,
no.
no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So TestBox keeps all those tests organized and helps you run them, or what exactly is TestBox doing for you?
So TestBox does a lot of things. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, there are BDD and XUnit styles of testing, and then to support that, it also ships with MockBox. So we can have we it. What that means is it has stubbing and mocking companion available. So that's another big advantage of using TestBox, and it has lifecycle methods which are available to us, such as I won't go into too much technical details, but what they do is they allow us to set our before running the test, they allow us to do the setting of the test, and then after the test is run, they allow us to tear down things. So we have lifecycle methods available. Then we also have automation capabilities in there. We have tons of matchers available there using which we can do our assert statements or expect statements. We have reporters, and there are tons of things available. Yeah.
Great. So why do you like using TestBox to do your behavior driven development?
So,
What is it?
so first of all, the biggest advantage is it supports BDD style of testing, which
Mm-hmm.
is very easy to understand, or it is easy to pick up. The next thing is it supports Mockbox, so you have mocking companion available to you. Third is it is open source, and you have a lot of um, online support available for that. There is entire test on. If you go to TestBox website, you have the entire documentation available there for free. So it, even if you're stuck at any point, you just refer to that, and it is easy to solve your problems. And we have a great community available on CFML Slack channel. We have a testing channel there, or we have lots of channels there. So if you ask questions about TestBox, you can get answers right away. So
That's great. So when you're writing a unit test, what's the general structure you use in TestBox for that?
so general structure is okay. Now we are coming back to again given when then kind of thing. So it is a 4-phase test. The first phase is the setup, which is also called as given. In this, you would set your things such as, okay, I would set up my component under test, or it is also called a system under test. So I can do basically, okay, this should have this is the my predefined condition before the test runs. So that's the first phase. Second phase is the exercise phase, or it is also referred to as like whatever comes in that when block. It is at this time we are exercising our system under test. The third is the verify stage. Here we are actually testing that if our test is producing the same results as we are expecting. So this is the then phase of given when then. And the last step is the tear down, also called as cleanup phase. And if you're using TestBox, you have lifecycle methods such as after all or after each to do that tear down for you. So that's the general structure for writing unit tests. But sometimes some of the unit tests don't need tear down because they don't talk to external systems or databases. So they don't have really done anything that needs to be cleaned out. So sometimes only first 3 phases solve the, like that's the structure for some of the tests.
Okay, great. And what kind of things would you be cleaning up in the teardown phase?
Um, sure. So let's say if I added a record in my one of the table, so I want to make sure, and I perform my test on that. So I want to make sure that that record gets cleaned up, and I don't leave that in my database. So that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. So unlike previously when people did manual testing and you had bunches of test data to clean up, you don't have to do that because you automatically clean it up
Right. So whatever
during
friction
the
data you
test.
set up in the setup phase, you have want to clear that.
Very tidy.
Yeah.
So you mentioned MockBox there, and I'm assuming that's what you use to do mocking. So tell us what mocking is and why you like MockBox for doing it.
Sure. So mock is a testable that, or it is also a fake implementation of something of a real object. So basically, what mock does it simulates the behavior of the real object. And why we have to do why we need the mocking, because let's say sometimes not all functions can be written or can live in isolation. They have external dependencies, such as they either talk to databases or file systems or external APIs, or they are just calling out another function. So you have a lot of dependency when you're writing a code. And sometimes it is um, impractical to incorporate these kind of dependencies into your unit test. So a example would be if you are doing, let's say, if you are writing a system that involves credit cards validation, credit cards. So while running your unit test, you don't want to reach out to actual, credit card validation and actual system that is charging your card. So that time you would use mocking and make sure that you're simulating that kind of behavior. So that's a basic idea of mocking. It just simulates the behavior of a real uh, object. And I'm using MockBox for that because MockBox has a lot of mocking capabilities available to us. First of all, it ships along with TestBox, and it has advanced level of mocking and stubbing capabilities. What that means is it has got a lot of methods, mocking methods that are available to us, and it has also got a lot of verification methods by which I can make sure that, okay, this was my mocked object, and I just want to now make sure that that performed, or that was behaving as I was expecting it to be. So it has got a lot of verification methods available, and yeah, it's great. Mockbox is great.
Now, sounds good. Just help us understand why you'd want to mock out something. What's the benefit of doing that?
Okay, so let's see. I have a file system, and one of my function. Uh, okay, I'm copying file from from path A to path B, and I want to make sure that while copying that, I didn't lose any of my data. Like file copying was successful. I want to make sure that worked. So if we are talking to real file system, in the testing, I have to make sure that file exists at path A, and then after the test is run, it went to path B, and then read their contents and make sure everything worked fine. But again, it's gonna, if since we are reaching to the actual system out here, it's gonna increase the time, and unit tests are supposed to run in milliseconds, so that, or seconds, so that won't be possible. And if you have network interruptions or anything like that, even if your code of file copying is working, because of network interruptions, you don't know what happened, like if your code failed while moving the file, or like really there was any kind of network interruption. So just to focus on that file copying code, I want to just mock out the entire file system there, and I have to use the fake file system path, and that way I can make sure that, okay, my file copy code works correctly.
Okay, so one of the benefits here is that if you haven't completed the whole program, you can still test stuff
Right.
because the
Yeah.
missing pieces are filled in
So
with the
so it
mocking
it
parts.
it don't need all the collaborators. It mocks are just replacement for those collaborators, and to that way we can like really isolate the behavior of just one smallest unit that we are doing.
And does MockBox work together with TestBox or?
Yes, they work together. Yep.
Great.
It's like hand in hand.
Okay. And is MockBox also open source or?
Yeah, it ships along with TestBox.
Oh, okay. So you just install TestBox and you get MockBox along with
Correct.
it.
Yep.
Great. So you mentioned behavior-driven development. Why do you like behavior-driven development so much? What does it do for you as a developer?
Uh, sure. So behavior-driven development, once I have all my tests written, it gives me a nice output, like readable output. Okay, so it actually prints the given when and then statement. So I know what is happening at each test level. So it produces nice documentation at the end, and that way we know our requirements are really getting satisfied. The next thing is with behavior-driven development, um, I'm focusing more on I'm focusing more on what my system is. Okay, let me reframe this statement. So with behavior-driven development, I'm focusing on what a system should do and not on how it should be implemented. So I'm not focusing on each like each CFC or just one method at a time. So um, so that's easy to um, I mean that is a natural flow. I feel that way. So
Have you found that it means you have fewer bugs in your code or easier bugs to fix or?
yeah, I have had some cases where I found bugs, and s- fortunately I had a unit test in place, and it was easy to fix those without having to wait to QA person finds it. So
Mm. And then how does this fit in your development workflow? Are you using some continuous integration tool like Jenkins or?
uh, we are using Jenkins, but okay, so I'm not covering continuous integration part in my this series, so I'm not sure how much we want to talk on this, but yeah, we are using Jenkins and continuous integration.
So you've got all this automated. Every time you make a build,
Right.
it
Yeah,
reruns all your
exactly.
tests.
Right, exactly.
Great. So anything else about TestBox or MockBox and behavior-driven development you want to share?
If you have not tried out, just go onto their website and try it out today. It's pretty cool.
Great. So let's shift gears now and look at some other questions more general about ColdFusion. Why are you proud to use ColdFusion?
Oh, that is a great question. So let's see. I started ColdFusion back in 2011, and ever since I'm using ColdFusion. So that time I was really new to ColdFusion, and I did not know anything about it. But I think from my personal experience, it was very easy to pick up and easy to learn, and there is a lot of online resources available. And what else? It is great for rapid development. And as I already mentioned, we have a great CFML community on out on Slack. It's already, I think, more than 2,000 members out there, so it's really great. And I like ColdFusion. Like I'm using it for 6 years, and I really like it. Prior to
Fa-
that, prior to that, I had worked on Java, but compared to that, I feel ColdFusion is much easier to learn, and doing development wise, it's great. And with all these box products that are coming now, are uh, it feels like it's more advanced language now.
Yeah, I think it's a more modern and advanced language than Java is at this point,
Right. Yeah.
both in the CFML, but also in the environment that you get with all the box
Right.
products and other products that are out there.
Right.
So,
It is really turning out to be modern these days. I agree.
yeah, yeah. So, what would it take to make ColdFusion more alive this year?
We already have a lot of conferences going on, so just try to attend those, make sure you meet people, network with those people, and try to gain and spread knowledge, ColdFusion knowledge as much as possible, and be active in the CFML community, and just try to grow the community every day.
Great. So you're going to be speaking it into the box. What are you looking forward to at that conference?
I'm really excited about it. First of all, this is my first ever conference. I have not attended any one before, so I'm really excited about this. And I'm looking forward to, I guess there are over 28 sessions overall. And also there is a pre-workshop, pre-conference workshop. So I'm going to attend command box deep dive. So I'm really excited about that. And again, the lots of sessions, and as I mentioned, this is my first conference, so basically I'm just excited about the entire new experience.
Yeah, it was a great conference when I was there last year. Lots of cool new technology, interesting people, very friendly. So.
Exactly. So meeting new people, yeah.
And
are you going to be there this year as well?
I won't be there this year, but
Okay.
I'm sure I'll go in another year. I have a conflicting event happening.
Okay.
So,
okay.
And then the other nice thing is it's in Houston, Texas. So for those of us in the northeast of the United States, it's a little warmer.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But in April, it's not like crazy hot. So it's
Right. Yeah.
it's just very pleasant. And of course, you get the Texas hospitality as well. So
yeah,
great event to go
to
to.
Houston, so that's an advantage.
Lots to see in Houston. So
Yeah.
museums and culture. So
Sure.
and of course Texas barbecue. You can't get away from that.
Oh yeah.
So if people want to find you online, what are the best ways to do that?
So I'm on LinkedIn, and that's the best way to reach out to me.
Okay, and we'll put that link into the show notes along with all the things you mentioned.
Sure.
And good luck with your talk this year. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. It was great talking to you, and I'm really looking forward to the conference.